Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. This evening I'm going to complete the series of the first three suttas. This often taken as a set. They're all relatively short suttas out of great significance. And there's introduce it with a little bit of the background story, which is quite a colorful one for the third sutta. The third sutta is the fire sermon. And after the Buddha had stayed for a time with the 5 original bhikkhus, he then began to wander and traveled, as they say, traveled in stages. Wandered a little bit and stopped for a few days, wandered again, and heading towards the Naranja River. And he had some various encounters along the way, which I won't get into. When he arrived at the Naranja River, there was at that time in that place there was a large community of matted hair fire worshippers. This was a sect that they never cut their hair and they went about naked, and their primary practice was tending the sacred fire. And there was a large number of them, 1,000 all told, in 3 separate groups, under the overall leadership of a man named Uravala Kassapa. And when the Buddha arrived at his encampment, he asked if he could have lodgings for the night. And Uravala Kassapa said, well, we're pretty full up, but we've got there's the bathhouse. You could stay in there, but I wouldn't really recommend it because there's a ferocious naga living in the bathhouse. Naga is, for those who haven't heard that phrase, is a class of beings that are like dragons, large fire-breathing serpents who have shape-shifting abilities. They can appear in different forms, but their native form is like a large cobra. And there's actually a few stories in the canon and the commentaries about nagas taking over people's bathhouses. They seem to have a propensity for saunas. In any case, the Buddha said, "Well, I'm not concerned. I'll stay there." And during the night, the Uravala Kassapa could see fire and smoke issuing from the bathhouse, and he thought, "Oh, that poor samana, he seemed like a good fellow, and that naga's making short work of him." And in the morning, the Buddha appeared in good condition and came down for the meal. He had his alms bowl, and he showed Kassapa inside his alms bowl was a little tiny snake curled up peacefully. And he said, this is your naga, I've tamed him. And Kassapa thought, oh, this is a monk of great power and majesty. It's too bad he's not an arahant like me. And the Buddha stayed for some time in the vicinity of these fire worshippers. And there's a long series of miraculous occurrences. At one time, Kassapa was having a festival, and many lay people were coming to make offerings and venerate his fires. And he told the Buddha about it and says, you're invited to come. But he was thinking, oh, this samana will be, people will like him too much and he'll get all the offerings and my people won't get anything. So the Buddha, instead of going to the festival, the Buddha went to Turukuru, the northern continent on the other side of Mount Meru, which in the geography, the mythical geography of the time, that would have been a distance greater than going to the moon in modern measurement. And he went to Turukuru to walk his arms around, and then he went to Lake Anotata in the high Himalayas to eat the meal and have his day rest. And then he went back to Uruvelu's encampment, and the festival was over. And Uruvelu asked him, "Why didn't you come to the festival?" And the Buddha said, "Well, I could see in your mind you didn't want me to come." And so Kassapa thought to himself, "Oh, this fellow can read minds. He's quite powerful, but too bad he's not an arahant like me." And there were other smaller displays of psychic power. One day the Buddha split all the logs for the sacred fire just by the power of his mind, and so on. And every time one of these incidents occurred, Kassapa would think the same thing. He has great power, but he's not an arahant like me. Until finally one day the Buddha said, "This guy's not catching on," and he said, "I'll have to shock him," and he confronted him, and he said to him directly, "Uruvela Kassapa, you are not an arahant, nor are you on the way to arahantship." And Kassapa was immediately stricken and saw the truth of what the Buddha said and asked for teachings. So the Buddha ended up converting Uruvela Kassapa and his 1,000 followers, and they cut off all their matted hair and threw them in the river. And the fire sermon, this was the prelude to the fire sermon. The fire sermon the Buddha gave to the 1,000, they all ordained as bhikkhus, to the 1,000 new bhikkhus. And he used the theme, because these had all been fire worshippers, he used the theme of fire as a metaphor in the sutta. And he said, everything is burning. What is burning? The I is burning. I consciousness is burning. Forms are burning. I mean, visible forms are burning. And the feeling that arises from the sight of visible forms, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, is a burning. In short, birth, old age, sickness, death, grief, lamentation, and despair are burnings. The ear is burning. Sound is burning. Ear consciousness is burning. And the feeling arising upon ear consciousness is burning. The nose is burning. Odors are burning. Nose consciousness is burning. And the feeling arising from nose consciousness is burning. Taste is burning. The tongue is burning. Flavors are burning. Tongue consciousness is burning. The body is burning. Tangibles are burning. Body consciousness is burning. The mind is burning. Mind objects are burning. The feelings arising from mind objects are burning. In short, these 6 senses and their bases and the consciousnesses and the feelings dependent upon them are burning. And what are they burning with? They are burning with the fires of raga, dosa, moha, passion, ill will, and delusion. And when a noble disciple sees that these sense bases are burning, then nibbida arises in him. Nibbida arising in him, viraga arises. Viraga arising, vimutti arises. And then he knows, I am liberated. I have made an end of suffering. That which has to be done is done. Now, I'll explain those terms. I left them untranslated because they're, particularly nibbida is a term that is notoriously difficult of translation. This afternoon I was looking at a few different sources I could find at hand to see how they translate nibbida. And it's everything from turning away, revulsion, disenchantment, disillusion, and several more. And sometimes the same translator will, in his earlier work and later work, change his mind and retranslate it as something different. It's one of those Pali words that is simply does not have a good English equivalent. But it's a very important mental state in the development of wisdom. And it's an important part of the process unfolding with vipassana meditation. Nibbida is the disenchantment. We can start with that as a translation. Before nibbida arises, the person is enchanted by the objects of the senses. They seem intriguing and wonderful and satisfying and endlessly fascinating. And with the development of greater clarity of seeing, then the mind begins to weary of the objects of the senses. How this works in the progress of insight is explained in some detail in the Visuddhimagga, the classic meditation manual written by Buddhaghosa in the Middle Ages. And it's a primary text in the Theravada tradition. Buddhaghosa talks about the process of insight, uses the analogy of a man fishing for eels, and he's standing up to his waist in a swamp, and he reaches down in the water and fumbles around until he finds something wriggly and basically eel-shaped, and he pulls it out of the water, and he looks at it, and if it's marked with 3 stripes, he knows it's not an eel, it's a poisonous snake. So he tosses it away immediately. And he goes back to work, fumbling around looking for an eel. Then he goes to explain that the swamp is samsara, and the fisherman is the meditator. And he's looking in the mind for the unconditioned element, nibbana. But he finds, first of all, he finds snake after snake, which are the conditioned dhammas. And they're marked by 3 stripes, which are the 3 characteristics. And Ayameda Nandi's already mentioned these in one of her talks. The 3 characteristics of all phenomena are dukkha, suffering or unsatisfactory or provisional nature of things, imperfect nature of things, anicca, impermanence, and anatta, not self or emptiness. And every phenomena in samsara is marked by these 3 characteristics. So in the process of insight, in doing vipassana, you're methodically draining the swamp of eels, of snakes. You're methodically draining the swamp of snakes. You're looking at one snake after the other, and one conditioned phenomena after another, and you see they're all marked with the three characteristics. When things are seen clearly with this objective, non-grasping mind, with the not me, not mine, objective, clear looking, every single phenomena is seen as having this nature. It's imperfect, it's impermanent, and it's empty. In the ordinary stream of consciousness, whether you're meditating or not, the mind is constantly seeking to take an object. And this is, in a sense, the primordial addiction. This has been going on in your mind stream for who knows how many billion of years. You've been constantly, at each moment, taking an object. And this is driven by craving. There's a sense that the conscious awareness that is not liberated, it feels a need, it wants to complete itself with the object. And the next object in the row is going to be the perfect one. But every single object is imperfect, impermanent, and void. So the mind remains unsatisfied. It's impossible to satisfy desire with objects, sense objects. It can only be very temporarily appeased, and then it immediately wants more or different or something else. And on a momentary level, this can be seen in the meditation, how the mind keeps throwing up objects, and the mind and the conscious awareness is looking at them. And the only difference when you're doing the meditation, when you're doing vipassana, the only difference from the ordinary stream is that you're trying to make this process fully conscious. You're trying to be wide awake, aware of what's happening. So you see one object after the other. And at first, they can often be the same fascination. Like things are interesting. They're interesting, or they're terrifying, or they make me sad. They make me happy. They're important. They're wonderful, or they're painful. And things have this sort of emotional resonance. But then when they're looked at objectively, they're seen, oh, it's just imperfect, it's suffering, and it's falling apart, it's impermanent, and it's empty. What about the next one? Oh, same thing. And there gets to be a leveling, like all the objects have these characteristics, and they're all kind of samsara's nature. They're all shoddy goods, one after the other. Nothing is worth holding on to. Nothing is that fascinating anymore. And this is nibbida, is a kind of a weariness of samsara. You're just looking at this objects one after the other, oh, another one, another one, another one. And the mind loses that fascination with sense objects. And it gets this, so sometimes nibbida is translated as revulsion. Which I don't like that translation, because it has this very emotive, negative sense to it. It isn't so much that the mind is revolted, it's just that it's no longer interested. So disenchantment is not bad. It's disenchanted with the stuff. It's weary. It's okay, just more of the same, more of the same. And the nature of samsara is penetrated in this way. Samsara is the conditioned world, the conditioned experience, and it's like this huge carnival tent with a million different attractions, and everything's wonderful, and lights and parades and balloons, but it's all made up of illusion. There's nothing solid there. I like the analogy for samsara as like a kaleidoscope. It's a children's toy that you like a telescope, and you turn it and you see pretty colored objects, like mandalas. And the way a kaleidoscope is constructed, there's a few mirrors and a few pieces of broken colored glass. And as you turn this thing, they make different patterns. And the number of patterns is infinite or virtually infinite. But they're only made from a few pieces of broken glass. And samsara is like a kaleidoscope with 3 pieces of broken glass. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. And you keep turning it, and here's the human realm, here's the animal realm, here's the deva realm, here's the realm of the hungry ghosts. And there's a million possibilities. But they're all just these 3 factors, cycled again and again. When you look at it minutely in the insight meditation, you see that. Yeah? And you see that in the fire sermon, he talks about the 6 senses. It goes through the senses in terms of their physical base. There's the eye, ear, and so on. The object of the sense, a form, a sound, an odor, and the consciousness that arises, and the feeling which arises associated with that. When we have a sense contact, then there's a feeling, it's pleasant or unpleasant. And these 6 senses, the 5 of the body and the mind sense, they constitute the world. That's the world we live in. And the Buddha said in another place, what is the world? Loka, was the Pali. What is the world? The world is these 6 senses. And what are the 6 senses? The 6 senses are the world. So the world we experience is through these 6 senses and no other way. And the objects of the senses are experienced as burning with these 3 fires of passion, hatred, and delusion. These are the 3 root defilements, and they underlie and drive the process of samsaric becoming. And putting the fires out requires this clear seeing. So you're not dazzled. You're not blinded and confused by the multiplicity of the objects. When you see the underlying sameness of conditioned objects, then it's possible to arouse nibbida. And there's, in different places, it's given this sequence of states that emerges into liberation. And in this particular sutta, it's not mentioned, but the precursor to nibbida is often given as yata bhuta jnana dasana, which is one of those delicious Pali compounds that packs a lot of meaning into one word. It means the knowledge and vision of things as they actually are. So this is another way of clear seeing. So penetrating the natures, when one penetrates the nature of the Dhammas, the conditioned Dhammas, and sees them according to the 3 characteristics, then nibbida naturally arises. There's a disengagement, which is another, I think Thanissaro uses that, disengagement. There's a disengagement, a disenchantment, a turning away, a loss of interest, a loss of fascination in the objects. And the sense arises of the futility of the objects and the futility of the round of rebirth. And from nibbida naturally arises the next stage, viraga, which is dispassion, is a literal translation. Raga is passion. It's one of the three roots. And viraga is dispassion. So the passion for samsara goes out. Now the fire goes out. The fire is not fed anymore with the fuel of raga, dosa, moha. And when the fire goes out, then it's possible to experience vimutti, liberation. This is what is usually called in English enlightenment, although that's another funny word, and I don't know really how the word enlightenment got elected to the position to describe this state, because it doesn't really correspond very well to anything in Pali. It's usually called vimutti, liberation, which literally means breaking the chains, or sometimes bodhi or sambodhi, waking up, or in technical passages, like in the Abhidhamma, it's called path and fruit, maggapala. But there is this, it's the end, or sometimes it's referred to as kina asawa, the ending of the asawas, the ending of the defilements. And this is, in the case of the fire sermon, all 1,000 of the fire ascetics are said to have attained arahantship at the end of the sermon. So it says that kinasawa for the 1,000, these 1,000 ascetics. They were probably individuals who had very good karma, and even though they had false views with their fire practice, they still had restrained the senses for many years in their practice. So they were primed. All they needed to have was a clear understanding of the process, and they could make that penetration. So this fire of samsara is something that we feed constantly, moment by moment. We're constantly throwing fuel on the fire. Samsara is essentially something we do. And nibbana is what happens when we just stop doing that. Going back to the Visuddhimagga, and his Buddhaghosa's description of the process, he talks about the mind in the end, after weariness of samsara, and the process that the juice is taken out of the process. The process is still continuing on for a while, but it no longer has that passion behind it. So the mind is weary of it, and it's not so interested in it. It's going on. And then eventually that, because the grip of samsara now is quite light, it's possible for the mind to do that which it has not done since beginningless time, and alight upon non-occurrence. It alights upon non-occurrence. So in other words, it just doesn't do that anymore. So it's like, oh, what if I just don't do it? What if I just don't jump to a sense object? And that's really the essence of making an end, is just not doing it. Stopping. Nibbana is cooling or blowing out. The verb nibbana is a participle from the verb nibbeti, to extinguish or blow out. And the mundane, and like a lot of the spiritual terminology in Buddhism comes from a mundane word, mundane usage, given a new elevated meaning. The mundane usage of nibbeti and nibbana is extinguishing, like you would a candle. So if you were to ask someone, did you put the candles out? Oh yes, they're out. He would say in Pali, nibbana, The candles are nibbana. And this is the extinguishment of the fires and the liberation from the samsaric process of conditionality. And the way to get there, the only way to get there is the clearly seeing, penetrating the nature of samsara, so that it's possible for one to experience this disengagement. So you have to do it. The only way to do it is one moment at a time. And that's the methodical work of vipassana, is trying to examine with a microscope the process of samsara, looking at momentary occurrences, conditioned phenomena arising at the 6 sense gates, one after the other, and seeing them with this clear vision. And if they're seen clearly, then the understanding, the wisdom and understanding of the 3 characteristics naturally arises. And the way it works is that at any given time, one or the other of the 3 characteristics will be most evident. And when they're penetrated, when any one of the characteristics is penetrated in depth, it becomes a gateway to liberation. So there's mention of the 3 gateways. Someone who attains to liberation by penetration of the nature of dukkha, suffering or imperfection, is said to be a body witness. Attainment through impermanence is called the signless liberation, animata. And attainment through the gate of not self is called the void liberation. So one or the other of the characteristics at any moment will be most evident, and they all relate to each other and imply each other. The 3 characteristics are not evident to the untrained mind because they're concealed in characteristic ways. The characteristic of impermanence is hidden by the illusion of continuity. According to Abhidhamma theory, dhammas only last for an instant, and they but they are preceded and succeeded in a sequence governed by cause and effect and conditionality, so that adjacent dhammas are naturally similar. So we tend to think of things, mental or physical objects, as persisting in time, when actually we could say at an atomic level, they're flickering in and out of existence. In the physical theory that underlies the Abhidhamma texts, they say that motion is impossible. What appears to be motion is successive arising in adjacent locations. So the vision is of a universe, mental and physical, that's momentarily flashing in and out of existence according to laws of conditionality, of cause and effect. And when you look at any individual Dhamma that arises to the mind, it has that very effervescent nature. It's arising to the mind and it's falling away. And it's possible that in some states of vipassana, when it's going really well, to perceive the world like that, like almost like a strobe light effect, like a series of immediate images, still a sequence of like the way before digital age, the way film used to be made, still pictures in a sequence. Then you run it through the projector, and they appears to be motion. So there's an illusion of continuity, as there is with the film. There's an illusion of continuity. The factor of not self, anatta, is masked by what's called the illusion of compactness, which means that when we look at any formation, we see our mind imposes on the formation a structure, and we see a slice of space-time reality as arbitrarily defined by boundaries. So we see a human being instead of a mass. We see a person instead of a mass of processes and organs and bits and pieces and things coming and going, interpenetrating. So we tend to see things in discrete objects instead of as momentary phenomena. One of the modern writers, well, reasonably modern, is Sherbatsky, the Russian, who wrote in the early 20th century about Buddhism. And I don't know Russian. This is reading it in English translation, so I'm not sure his exact phrase, but in English translation, he calls Dhamma Dhamma's point instant. A Dhamma is a point instant. And I thought that was brilliant, that something that exists at a point for an instant is a definition of a Dhamma. So this is the kind of degree of refinement that you should be striving towards with vipassana, seeing individual dhammas as the goal. And the characteristic of dukkha is masked in a different way than the other two. The other two concepts are kind of philosophical, and they require some thought and some explanation. They're rather technical. But dukkha is masked by change of postures. Dukkha is masked by. That's why someone who penetrates dukkha is called a body witness, because it's usually evident in the body. And we tend to evade dukkha by fidgeting. Right? There's a story about a Burmese teacher, a laywoman who decades ago she was a famous teacher in Burma, and one of her methods was people came to her place for instruction. She would tell them to sit in a comfy chair. And take your time, make yourself comfortable. Are you completely comfortable? Are you sure? Okay, now don't move a muscle. And then she'd start talking, and it would only take about 5-10 minutes before the person would have to cross their legs the other way or lean on the other elbow or something. And she'd say, I told you not to move. I said, well, I was uncomfortable. Well, you told me you were comfortable. You're perfectly comfortable. The human body is naturally a mass of dukkha. And when people, of course, everybody knows that when you try and sit still in meditation, particularly when you're a beginner, there's often a lot of pain. And this is, in large part, the natural dukkha of the body that you're no longer running away from. by changing posture. The posture doesn't eliminate the dukkha, but it moves it around a bit, so it's not so evident. It's like a change is as good as a rest kind of idea. When you try and sit still in the meditation, you experience the dukkha in the body, so that the element of dukkha becomes evident, and it's not being fidgeted away from. And it also applies figuratively to the mind, that we can fidget away from the dukkha in the mind, where the mind can run away from not wanting to be still. It can go off into daydreams or memories or internal grumbling or storylines of different kinds, rather than stay still, because it's escaping from the mental dukkha that's inherent, that's in nature of samsaric existence, is dukkha, anicca, anatta. And of the three characteristics, we talk a lot about not self in Buddhism because it's actually special. It's in a very important way. It's the most universal of the three characteristics, because all three characteristics apply to sankharas. That's conditioned objects. Every conditioned object, so every Dhamma that arises to the sense gates, whether it's a feeling or a sensation or a thought or a vision of the eyes or a sound at the ears, they all have the three characteristics. Dukkha, anicca, anatta, all conditioned objects. But there's one Dhamma that is not a sankhara, and that's nibbana, the unconditioned. And the unconditioned is also empty. So it's also anatta, but the other two characteristics don't apply. So there's, if you look in the chanting book, and the longer chant that we haven't been doing, there's some Dhamma teachings in that chant that are quite good. And one line says, "Sabbe sankhara dukkha, sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe dhamma anatta." Sabbe is all. So all sankharas are dukkha, all sankharas are impermanent. And then the noun changes for the third clause. It says all dhammas are anatta. Because if you did a Venn diagram, sankharas would be entirely within Dhamma. All sankharas are dhammas, but not all dhammas are sankharas. There's one Dhamma that's not a sankhara, and that's nibbana. So that's the most universal characteristic, is emptiness. Both the conditioned and the unconditioned are void. So we're trying to see things clearly. We're trying to see things in this way by damping down the fires, the fires that blind us, fires of raga, dosa, moha, passion, hatred, and delusion. And when those passions are subdued, then the sense objects continue to arise, but they no longer have that fascination. Nibbida can occur, because the things are seen in their real nature as they actually are. And the conditioned phenomena are then no longer a source of fascination. And the energy has gone out of the process of samsara. And so the grip of samsara on the mind is loosened. And it becomes possible to disengage. So it may seem, I'll just conclude by saying this, that it may seem a long process, a long, difficult process, but on another way of looking at it is that nibbana is always just one mind moment away. So just keep hauling those snakes out of the swamp. And eventually you'll catch an eel.
Andamayang Dhamma Vadagata Sadhu Karang Tatamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami.
Let's do reflection. Let's do page 47 in my book here. The 5 subjects for frequent recollection. What's the page in the other book? Do you know? 44? It's 5 subjects for frequent recollection. Handamayang abinya pachikana patang banamase.
Jara Dhammo Jara Atita. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. Bhayati Dhammam hi bhayati anatito. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. Marana dhammam hi marana nanatito. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. Sabehi me piyehi mana pehi nana bhavo vina bhavo. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. Kama sakam hi kama dayada kama yoni kama bandhu kama patisarano yang kamang karisami kalayanang wapapakang watasadayado bhavisami. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Ewang amehi abinyang pachavekitabang. Thus we should frequently recollect.
We'll do the closing homage.
Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one. Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One.
Swakato
Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammang namasami, I bow to the Dhamma.
Supatipano
Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho, the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sangam namami, I bow to the Sangha.
Thank you for listening. To learn how you can support the teachers and Dharma Seed continue these offerings, please visit